sheet. Ta-da! What do we call this? Plexiglass. Everybody calls it plexiglass. If you read all that up there, plexiglass looks like acrylite, perspex, Krylux. Plexiglass is actually a trade name or a trademark name by some manufacturer. I don't know who.
A brand name like Kleenex.
A brand name like Kleenex. Yes. This is actually these two pieces of sheets are actually not acrylic sheet. This is polycarbonate. It's very similar material. It looks the same, but it's different. This is much more flexible and much less brittle. It's a little softer, so it scratches easier, a little bit easier than acrylic sheet, but it's also much more flexible. It's also quite a bit more expensive too. And the reason I'm holding this up is because this is the example that I had. It also comes in colors. We have some orange that's opaque. We have some red that is translucent. Both of these are translucent. Neither one of these are clear. But you can get it in. It's plastic. We color it in it to make it any color that we want. Notice that these are 1/8 of an inch thick, and these are 1/2 an inch. So it comes in a variety of things in a holistic color. Safe substitute for glass on stage. That's why we use it. How many people saw, what show was it? These Shining Lives. All the windows that were on stage. That was the most expensive part of that set because we didn't have any of the plastic, we didn't have any material left over from our inventory. We didn't have enough of anything to do the whole show. And the windows that were designed were like this odd size based on, compared to the stock sizes, the standard off-the-shelf sizes of sheets that I can buy at the store. And so it was wildly expensive to buy that stuff. Steel. Look, I brought some pieces of steel. We don't use a ton of steel, but it comes in, you can get it in all kinds of different sizes and shapes. We love square tube because it's fairly lightweight and it's steel. We can cut it and shape it. It comes in a variety of sizes. There's some 1.5 by 16 gauge. This is 1 inch square by 16 gauge. This is a 1x2 16 gauge. 16 gauge refers to how thick it is. We can get it in different thicknesses. Yes, Marley?
Is steel actually 1 inch when it says 1 inch, or is it a different nominal thing?
Yes. If we're talking about square tube, yes. This is actually 1 inch by 2 inches. This is actually 1 inch by 1 inch on the outside. And if we buy this in 16 gauge, if we buy this in 16 gauge, it's going to be 1 inch by 1 inch on the outside. If we buy it in 18 gauge, it's going to be 1 inch by 1 inch on the outside. The internal dimension is going to change. For square tube, we talked about angle iron. This is 1.5 by 1.5 inch, or 1.25 angle iron, but this is 3/16 of an inch thick. So it's 3/16 of an inch thick, but it's 1.25 inch here and 1.25 inch here. This is 3/4 inch angle iron, but it's 1/8 of an inch thick there and there. And it will be denoted by how wide and how tall it is. Each shape has its own norms for how it's described. And so when you get into it, you'll start talking about where we go crazy is pipe. Okay? Because back in the day when they started making pipe, why did they make pipe? Come on, somebody knows this. When I go turn the faucet on in my house. Oh, you said I didn't hear that. To carry a fluid or a gas is why we made pipes. Okay? Back in the day, before they had any real standards and before they had refined or improved their manufacturing process, they started making pipe and they made it nice and thick because, they didn't want it to burst whenever they put some pressure on it. over time, and so when they did that, they developed fittings based on the outside diameter of the pipe. And so you could screw the fittings on. Well, then as they refined and improved the process for making steel and managing the quality of the steel, they were able to make the pipe thinner. Well, instead of making it thinner on the outside, they made it thinner on the inside because they had already developed all these fittings and they didn't want to have to redo all the fittings. So, guess what the diameter of 1.5 inch schedule, this is a piece of 1.25 inch schedule 40 pipe, meaning that it is 1.25 inch, that when we refer to it, it's 1.25 inch. Schedule 40 refers to how thick it is, okay? So how much pressure it can handle. Where do I measure to get 1.25 inch on this piece of pipe? No. Guess where are any of the dimensions of this piece of pipe 1.25 inch? No, because back in the day when they started manufacturing pipe, they based it on the inside of the pipe was 1.25 inch, and so then the pipe was so thick, so that's how big the fittings got made. So then whenever they made it thinner from the inside out because they didn't want to disrupt the fitting sizes. So nothing about pipe, actual measurements. 1.5 inch pipe is actually 1.93 OD on the outside diameter. 1.25 inch pipe is 1.660 on the out. I just know those because I've used them a lot. The dimensions of pipe are not the same as the numbered pipe. It gets really confusing. Now, what other round piece of steel can we buy? I don't have a good example of it to bring up here. But what else can we buy that's round and steel? Tubing. We can buy round tubing.
Yeah.
If we go buy round tubing, guess what its measurements are? It's just like square steel. The actual outside diameter of that steel is if we buy 2 inch tubing, it's going to be 2 inches on the outside. And we're going to buy 2 inch 18 gauge steel. So there's a large variety. So yes and no. Pipe is the outlier on it. The other thing about the pipe fittings is it's a worldwide worldwide standard. If you go to Europe and you find threaded fittings, they're going to be exactly the same size. I can put some fittings in my pocket, buy them off the shelf at the Ace Hardware, put it in my pocket, go over to Europe, walk in the store, buy a piece of pipe, and thread it on there. Now, is that really going to happen? No, because the majority of all the Europeans have stopped using threaded pipe in their construction. They're using, you will find very little threaded pipe in actual construction these days. The only time you'll really find it is gas line, where they still use it for some applications. Most of the other technology has advanced. We're making gas line majority of gas line is plastic these days. The majority of water line is plastic these days. We're not using, this is an old technology that we're not using so much anymore. Lots of questions about steel. Be curious. When you don't know exactly what this is, go forth and learn. Knowledge is power. How did I learn all this stuff? I learned very little of it sitting in the classroom, looking at a thing, listening to somebody talk. I learned most of it by going, oh crap, how are we going to solve this problem? Okay, what are we going to use? Oh, that didn't work. Let's try something else. Or talking to my friends and colleagues about, hey, I'm trying to accomplish this. What are you using to do that? Oh, we've got this cool product that we use. Or we use that. Or we tried this and it didn't work. So don't try that. Look for something else. Or we did this, we used this, it kind of worked. Here's the problems that you're going to have with it. So, as you're looking to solve problems, go to the store, look at the stuff. Don't listen to the person at the store; they're usually idiots. I'm kind of kidding, and I'm kind of not. typically,
It depends on the person at the store. Sometimes you get a really helpful one, and
yes,
sometimes
exactly.
they look at you like you're a crazy person, and you're like, well, I do work in the theater, so it's fine.
Exactly. Because they're most of them that work in stores either have a little bit of experience or have some experience. Mostly they're skilled at stocking shelves and remembering part numbers and knowing where stuff is in the store. They're not so versed on how to use the products, but they do know something about the use of the products. But when I come on, I am never using the product, rarely. I'm oftentimes, let's say it differently, I am oftentimes using the product in a way that it was not designed, engineered, or intended to ever be used that way. And so when I'm walking up and down the store, up and down the aisle looking for something, I'm digging through all the stuff going, okay, well, that's too big or that's too small. What if we had one of those? And then the person comes along and tries to help me, and they have no clue. Because I am not trying to use the product in the way that it was intended. And so they don't understand me very well. So, but yes, do that all the time about everything. Be curious. Okay, that's the